Have you ever heard of the event Y2K? For some reason, lots of people collectively thought that computers would cease to function at the turn of the millennium, clocks would reset to zero, and the world's data erased. Obviously none of that came to pass in the end, and in all likelihood you are viewing this on a digital device. However, I am acutely aware of my audience, so if you indulge in the fine art of cave theatre, I support your decision and advise this video is viewed in at least 30 shadows a minute. Getting back on track, seeing as we not only survived but thrived beyond the cataclysm, it's fitting that a movie celebrating a similar triumph would be released the same year. Dinosaur. This movie was recently slandered to millions of people and labelled the worst Disney movie of all time by Schaffrillas over on his channel.
And the single worst Disney movie of all time is... Say it. Dinosaur.
He also happened to issue a challenge for anyone who thought this film was actually good to make a video about why they thought that. Okay, usually my film reviews, of which I've made 2, focus on some of the backstories behind the film, and I generally try to take an objective view while researching and watching with a conclusion that gives my thoughts at the end. But with a shot at the big time on the line, I can't afford to waste time with trivial things like being fair and integrity. So without further ado, why Dinosaur 2000 is in fact a good film, and definitely not the worst Disney film ever made. Dinosaur is an animated picture released by Walt Disney Feature Animation in the year 2000. The film was originally pitched on the set of RoboCop in 1986 to the director of the film, Paul Verhoeven. The pitching was being done by special effects expert Phil Tippett, who had become frustrated with the time investment required to ensure actors and crew were prepared for the necessary stunts. He remarked that the duo should produce a dinosaur picture to avoid being held up by actors in robot outfits. Paul liked the idea and envisioned a darker, more somber tale of a journey from a barren landscape to a promised land. In fact, Paul and Phil had become attached to a version of the film that would have seen a documentary-style approach with violent undertones throughout, culminating with the extinction of all dinosaurs in the infamous Chicxulub asteroid impact. This is where the film's preliminary issues began to arise. Verhoeven and Tippett pitched the film to Jeffrey Katzenberg, Disney's then chairman. The duo had calculated the initial budget estimates to be in the region of $45 million, to which Katzenberg voiced doubts about the movie's appeal to a wider audience and countered with $25 million. It is here that both Paul Verhoeven and Phil Tippett would exit from production of the film. Thomas G. Smith, a man who not only acted as producer of the project but also interim director after Phil and Paul's departure, later remarked on the lack of clarity about the project's direction. Disney were in the market for a cutesy dinosaur film in the same vein as what The Land Before Time eventually became, whilst the original screenplay written by Wallen Green as commissioned by the original duo was directly at odds with this notion. Additionally, there were creative differences about how certain characters should be achieved in the film. Smith was set on the idea of using actual trained lemurs for Aladar's adoptive family, whereas Disney, who had caught wind of Jurassic Park's intention to use ambitious digital effects, ultimately chose to shelve the film until the same could be done for Dinosaur. At this point, I'd like to make my first case about why this film is in fact an underrated piece of Disney's portfolio. As previously stated, Disney were determined to make this film entirely digitally in order to keep up with the endeavours of rival studios. From the get-go, they knew that the tools at their disposal wasn't going to be enough and instead opted to shelve the film. However, upon returning to development, their ideas for digital composition of CGI characters into real-life environments wasn't panning out as they hoped. Enter a company called Alias. In order to serve the needs of the studio, Disney worked closely with Alias to develop a fully customizable suite of animation software that was later named Maya. The software contained all of the features they would need to undertake Dinosaur, and the product was developed alongside the film. The production of the movie Dinosaur is now widely credited for bringing about the creation of the Maya software. The reason this is so significant as to add it to Dinosaur's win column is that following Maya's genesis on the production of the film, the software became so pervasive in the industry that it has been used in every single Best Visual Effects winner since 1997, and won the creators 3 separate Oscars for technical achievement. Maya's been used to create virtually every notable modern animation, as well as a wide variety of special effects and blockbuster pictures, including but not limited to Ice Age, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, Frozen, and get this, Moana. So as history would have it, the creation of the Dinosaur film not only birthed one of the most widely used pieces of animation software, but by proxy virtually every digitally altered masterpiece in the 21st century. Alias was eventually acquired by Autodesk, and Maya was subsumed into their catalogue of products, where it remains to this day as a monument to the technical prowess of Dinosaur 2000. Okay, let's talk about the film's story. Seeing as this is not a full review but more of an argument for the film, I will skip the long-winded synopsis. There is, however, several points I would like to make about the film, both of my own accord and in direct response to Schaffrillas. Firstly, given that Tarzan came into Schaffrillas' list quite highly, I would have thought that Dinosaur's classic story of being raised outside of your kind may have appealed to him. In fact, it could be said that the film's stories mirror each other in many areas. The avenging of a parent's death against the same beast that killed them, the aforementioned raised by another species arc, as well as the initially reluctant father figure. Interestingly, one of Schaffrillas' main criticisms of Tarzan was Kerchak's reconciliation scene. I thought, by contrast, Yar's speedy warming to Aladar as a baby was multitudes more natural and convincing. Granted, Dinosaur doesn't have the irreverent charm of Tarzan by any stretch of the imagination, but the depiction of the movie story as just dinosaurs walking is outright wrong. I would posit to you that Dinosaur successfully implements established story components such as the Raised by Wolves character arc and its mirroring of elements from the biblical Exodus story, including similarities between Aladar's egg and Moses' journey down the Nile as an infant. I will be the first to admit that the storytelling often falls flat in parts of this movie, and by no means is this one of Disney's best works, but Schaffrillas, in my opinion, gave it an unnecessarily hard time. An example of this would be his assessment of Crone as the film's villain. Firstly, Crone isn't even this film's villain. He's an antagonist for sure, but by no means is he the big bad. That role goes to the stalkerish presence of the Carnotaurs that follow the dinosaur caravan as they make their journey. You could be forgiven for thinking that Crone is designed to be a villainous presence, but this misconception just further reveals the depth of not only the film, but also the character. From the get-go, the writers have said that Crone was not intended to be a villain. The late great Samuel E. Wright in a behind-the-scenes interview said the same, and that he felt Crone's character was misunderstood. I share the opinion of Eamon Butler, who oversaw the creation of Crone during development. He wrote that Crone is a tragic hero because he believes what he's doing is right. He elaborated further on the character's complexness, remarking he's a very sophisticated character, so we tried to come up with more sophisticated and subtle ways to suggest his nastiness. Throughout the film, Crone's antagonistic behaviour is mostly in service of keeping the caravan safe the only way he knows how, and his intentions of being a strong, resilient leader shine through. Perhaps the intended subtlety didn't come to fruition, with Crone's readily apparent cold disposition causing him to be subject to accusations of villainy, but if we really think about Crone's motivations throughout the film, we can see evidence of not only his devotion to his fellow dinosaur, but also the power's corrosive effect on his moral fibre. Also, large portions of this film stray away from the just walking nature of Schaffrillas' assessment, the most notable of which is the tense showdown between Aladar's group of stragglers and the Carnotaurs during the cave scene. Whilst the sacrifice of Bruton is quite forced, seeing as his reconciliation was like 2 minutes ago, his change of heart shows his detachment from Crone's iron-fisted and belligerent leadership in favour of giving and accepting help in times of need. It's a shame, therefore, how little time we spend with Bruton before they killed him in an event that made me feel very little whatsoever, even given the sacrificial nature of his demise. And now a final point on the story and character section.
What you need is a little help from the love monkey.
I'm not going to sit here and argue that Zinni is one of Disney's best characters or that he ranks highly in notable comic relief, but I would argue that the film would be worse off without him. I thought throughout the film that he was a charming addition to the cast that serves not only as comic relief, but also as a brother in kind to Aladar in the beginning. On the note of accuracy, I'd like to point out that great effort went into ensuring this film didn't stray too far from the truth while still portraying a half-decent blend of characters. Throughout the film, there are obvious and intentional workarounds, such as the presence of Carnotaurs much further north than they ever existed in real life. This had to be done, however, as Jurassic Park's decision to use a T-Rex as the main antagonist of their film matched that of Disney's, forced them to choose a new formidable carnivore. And whilst I acknowledge that effort does not always equal a good outcome, I am of the opinion that this movie deserves credit for pushing the boundary of what most thought an animated film could do. Despite Schaffrillas' critique of the film's appearance 22 years on, ingenious solutions such as their hair animation platform that allowed them to give the effect of realistically wet and clumped hair, and its eventual application to grassy and foliage scenes, allowing animators to have the characters dynamically affect their surroundings, will always live on as part of the film's prestigious legacy. In conclusion, there are many reasons why Dinosaur is not Disney's worst film, and yet, after going over all of its triumphs and why I thought that it doesn't have a place at the bottom of the Disney tier list, it has occurred to me that in order to dispel these accusations, I must suggest a suitable film to take its place. I present to you, The Black Cauldron. You might have thought that just because I did a video on this movie already, that it would get a pass. Absolutely not. If anything, I didn't go hard enough on that movie in my first video. The Black Cauldron is not only a colossal waste of one of the most promising IPs Disney has ever held, i.e. Lloyd Alexander's Prydain series of novels, it also introduced me to the worst character I've ever had the misfortune of coming across, Gurgi.
Oh, Master, come quickly! Gurgi found the wicked cauldron! Quick, follow Gurgi!
I cannot describe the elation me and my friends went through when he threw himself in that cauldron, only to be revived 3 minutes later. It's not just that he's annoying, he's a waste of screen time. Why didn't they set him up with some sort of showdown between the minion guy and him? I mean, they draw parallels between the two in the credits and stuff and in the sequence, and boy would I love to see that furry piece of shit take a beating. Okay, Gurgi ran over. If you'd like to hear more about the abomination of a film that is The Black Cauldron, please consider watching my first ever video essay in which I go over the production of the film, my gripes with it, and other areas of interest. Anyway, I hope I've swayed your mind about Dinosaur and left you with a newfound appreciation for the film. And if you're watching Schaffrillas, feel free to immediately make an angry response video during which you reference my channel by name and perhaps link my channel in the description and a pinned comment. Just a thought. Thank you all for watching, stay greasy.